Hello, everyone. We're live today on, what is today? Thursday, July 31st, 2025. And this is episode 153. I'll put that up on the screen. You can find the episode page at augforums.com/episode 153. If there's any related links I want to put, I'll put those on that page as well. And today we're going to be looking at acuCONNECT 2025 preparation part 1. So let me pull up my notes here so I don't forget what to talk about. I wanted to do this in a live broadcast format. So you got acuCONNECT coming up in September. If you want to register for that, it's just a 2-day virtual conference. You can go, I'll put it up on the screen, acu-connect.com. And I'm going to be doing a presentation there, as will a lot of other people. And I thought, as part of getting ready for that, if I've got about a month and a half to get ready for that, and if I don't give myself mini deadlines, then I'll probably just prepare for it a couple days before. But I thought using this live broadcast format would be a way to force me to prepare by giving myself mini deadlines. Hey, I'm going to go live on a certain day. I better have something to show. Second, there's the potential that someone might join this live. I'm not counting on that, but it'd be great if someone joins live and contributes to the conversation. And otherwise, it's just me on my own. But it's always better if someone or multiple people are able to contribute to the conversation in the comments. So if anyone is live, you can go ahead and drop a comment in there. And that'll help me to think of things that I never would have thought of on my own. And then the third reason why I'm doing it in this live format is it's kind of my lazy way of documenting how I built whatever I wind up showing at acuCONNECT. acuCONNECT is a shorter half an hour format. At least that's what it was last year. And I like that format. I think it's great to keep things to 30 minutes or less, but it also doesn't give you a ton of time to show the details, which I'm fine with. I like the shorter format. So what I'll do at acuCONNECT is show whatever I wind up building. I wouldn't call it a finished product, but as good as it got by that point. And I'll cover, I think, the important stuff of why I built it and how to use it. But then if you want to know how to build it on your own, that would need to be documented somewhere. Now, in the past, I've written up really long blog post articles with screenshots and done documentation that way. That's better for you, but it's a lot more work for me. And these days, I know I just don't have the time to do that. So this is my lazy way of documenting it. Not as good for you because you have to watch more video content and just kind of watch it at 2x speed or scroll through to find the stuff you care about. But at least I'm getting it out there and putting something out there, because at least something is better than nothing. All right, let's see what else I've got here in the way of introduction. I think that's it. So that's all I've got in the way of why I'm doing this live broadcast. And you can see if I pull back up the episode title, I've got this listed as part 1. So the idea is we'll have at least a part 2, probably a part 3. That might do it. We'll see. But it'll be a multi-part broadcast because for sure by today, I don't have the thing built yet. Today, I'll be focused on something that I mocked up in Excel just so you get an idea of what I'm thinking to build with some sample data. That's already mocked up, so we'll go through that. We'll geek out on that. But before we do that, I wanted to cover what it is I want to build and why. So I think it's hard to pick a scenario, or maybe impossible to pick a scenario that's useful for all Acumatica customers, because Acumatica is a typical mid-market ERP solution in that it's very horizontal. And so you've got manufacturing companies, distribution companies, construction companies, field service companies, e-commerce companies, which I would argue fall into the distribution company class, professional services companies, nonprofits. You got all sorts of different industries, and it's hard to find a topic that's useful for everyone. or maybe impossible. So, I did my best here, and I think one of the most popular segments, or one of the largest segments of Acumatica customers, are distribution companies. So I picked something in that area, and I think it's applicable for anyone who has inventory. So I went with a distribution example, and in a distribution company, there's always friction between finance and operations in a lot of different areas. But one particular area of friction is inventory, because finance wants to keep inventory as low as possible, because dollars invested in inventory could be invested in other places. Basically, inventory ties up cash from a financial perspective. But operations primarily cares about servicing customers. And when you're servicing customers in a distribution company, the most important thing, or one of the most important things, is to have what they want on hand so you could send it to them right away. To have everything on hand all the time would have a gigantic, unsustainable inventory balance. So you have these two competing needs, and that causes friction. Both are legitimate needs, though, because a business can't function without cash. So you have to acknowledge the financial need, but you also can't function without happy customers. So you have to acknowledge the customer need of servicing your customers. So my goal is to build something that shows how you're doing in both areas, financially and making your customers happy, but show it both in one place. Now, it's easy for finance to come up with their report that shows inventory balances, and they want to see that coming down. It's a little bit harder, actually, I think, for operations to come up with a way to show how you're doing in terms of delivering on time and what the customers wanted, but they could produce their report. So that's a little bit more difficult than finance. But even if you get those two reports, it's so much better if you have the two things in one place, because, at least in my opinion, it's not just about showing people information. It's about showing them information in a way that allows them to consume it as quickly as possible. And just for example, if you write an email, there's a big difference between the person on the other end having to spend 5 minutes to understand your email or 5 seconds to understand your email. When it comes to email, I would argue that if it's going to take them 5 minutes to understand it, they're probably not going to read the whole thing. They're not going to understand it. It'd be like, hey, can we have a meeting to talk about this? It's the same thing with a report. There's a big difference between giving someone information that takes them 5 minutes to consume or 5 seconds. And so the goal here is to put both of those things in one place, so your brain's not having to go back and forth between two different reports from two different departments, likely with two different formats, and you're trying to rely on your brain to combine them together. Let's do that in the report, so that it makes it much easier for people who are looking at that report, likely in a meeting, to understand it and be able to make decisions off of it. Now, the finance need, as I mentioned, is pretty simple. We just need to know the balance of inventory in dollars at a given point in time. That's a pretty simple calculation. The operational need is a little trickier, because how are you going to analyze how you're doing against your customers? Now, I'm going to go with a simple calculation, which is called service level. And if maybe I'll pull up ChatGPT here. Let's see. Let's just do a quick, actually, I think I already asked it this earlier. Yeah. So let me share my screen here. All right, so here's just an example of me asking ChatGPT. You can see here, I'm saying my company is a distribution company and they want me to calculate something called service level. Can you help me to calculate that? And ChatGPT comes back with 2 ways to calculate that. One is number of items delivered on time and in full divided by the total that were ordered. And let's see, was this? Oh, actually, yeah, I only cared about this first one. So then it does point out, well, you could measure it by lines or you could measure it by units or quantities. So if you think about a sales order, you could either look at the number of lines. So let's say there was an order that had 10 lines on it, and we were able to ship 9 of those lines, the full amount that they ordered, and we were able to ship it on time. But the 10th line, we weren't able to ship it on time, or we only shipped them half of what they ordered. In that case, you would take 9 lines that we fulfilled on time and in full, and you divide it by 10, which was the total lines on the order, and that would give you a service level of 90%. So that's one way to do it. That's measuring it by lines. I decided to go with measuring it by units. And what you're doing there is you're taking the actual quantities that were ordered. And so, you know what, let me pull up let me do a little Excel file here just to mock this up. So let's see here. Actually, no, that's good. So yeah, that first way, let's say we have a sales order and we got a line number. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Let's make this bigger. You're going to see I'm also going to use Excel when I'm mocking up this report. I think Excel is a good way to mock up some quick data and illustrate something. Let's get rid of the grid lines. Let's turn this into a table. So there's the line number on the order. Now let's say we also have the quantity ordered. And I'm just going to use the random function. Let's just do some random numbers between 10 and 100. It gives us some random quantities ordered. Then we'll do quantity shipped. And let me do this here. And let's say for these first 9 lines, we just ship the quantity that's ordered, but on this 10th line, we only ship half of it. So 0.5. And let's round it so we get a whole quantity. Okay. Then if we look at the totals on this, looks like that. I don't know why. Oh. Oh, looks like this carried down. I did not want it to do that. Let's see. This one, let's see if I can change this. Okay. Okay, now I've got what I want. So if we were to use that first service level calculation just by number of lines, we would say, all right, shipped in full. I'm just going to call it good. Are we good? So we shipped. If this minus this equals 0, then yes, otherwise no. All right. So if we were to do that, then we could do service level by line, we would be at we'll just count the yeses divided by the total number of lines. Oh, what did I do wrong here? Count. I need to count A. There we go. Okay. So there's that 90%. Now, if we were to do service level by quantity, what we would do is we would take total quantity shipped. Now, I'm also assuming we're shipping this on time. I'm just keeping it simple here and not including the dates. So we'll take the total quantity shipped divided by the total quantity ordered. Oops, not minus. Divided by. All right, so you can see if we do that, we get a service level of 96%. Let me save this so I don't lose it. All right, so that's the difference. Line is obviously, well, maybe not obviously. I think it's simpler. Quantity, though, I like it better because you're giving more credit to a line that had more quantity on it. So like in this case, you're giving more credit to a line where someone ordered 96 versus a line where they ordered 25. So maybe if you ship the 96 on time, but you didn't ship the 25 on time, or you shipped a little less than 25, it's not just saying that would be 50% if you only looked at those two lines. One's good, one's bad, 50% if you look at it by line. But if you look at it by quantity, you'd be doing better than 50% if you ship the one with more quantity on it. So I like that one better. Then you could also argue, well, what if you look at it by dollars? We want to give more credit to a shipment of a higher dollar item than a lower dollar item. You could look at it that way. So there's different ways to do it, but I'm going with, for the sake of our example, that I'm going to build service level by quantity. All right. Long-winded way of saying that it's more difficult to calculate the operational number of service level, as you can see, than the simpler finance. Hey, what's our total inventory dollars? Okay, that's enough on that. Next thing I want to point out is then we need to figure out how to show both of these things in one chart. So as I mentioned before, it's one thing to get finance presenting their chart, operations presenting their chart. It's a whole nother ballgame to get it in one place. And that's what we're going to go for. Put it on one chart. And the challenge there is you're going to have two very different values on the axis, the vertical y-axis, because one service level is going to be 0 to 100%, which numerically is like 0 to 1 with a bunch of decimals. And inventory value is going to be, maybe $5 million to $10 million. Two very different values. So how are you going to get them on the same chart? We're going to look at that probably more in part 2 when we try to figure out how to actually solve this. But I'm at least going to show you how I did it in my Excel mockup. Then I only have 2 more points here on the intro. First point is I want to see how these metrics are doing over time. One thing I've picked up, especially just the last few years, when I'm creating a report, I used to just care about getting the number. What's the KPI, or call it a metric, or whatever you want to call it. Give me that number. What is my inventory value? Just give me a number. But especially the last few years, I've realized a lot more of the value of seeing how that number is doing over time. I want to see the trend, because your brain is able to get a lot more out of that to see how it's trending. Is it trending up? Is it trending down? Has it been going up and down? And so I want to see it over time. And so we'll do that. We're just going to do simple line charts. I think that shows that very well. Then the last thing I want to point out is I also want to see how these numbers are doing by week. Now, I think the typical way of reporting is you report by month or even by quarter, but I think month is most people's default. And I think a lot of that just has to do with financial reasons, like your utility bill comes by month. And so if you're budgeting, you wind up looking at things by month because a lot of your expenses tend to be done by month. But in an operational world, also by month is just the easiest way to do it in most reporting tools. But in an operational world, once a month is not frequent enough for me. I don't want to wait till the end of the month to know how I'm doing. I want to know more frequently than that. For me, daily is a little too much. You're working in the chaos of the business. And if I look at it every day, it's maybe too much. So I personally, for operational data, like to just default in general to by week. So I like that because then you can have that weekly meeting, maybe on a Monday morning, to review how you did the previous week. And now you use that information to set your plan for the current week. And then you just put your head down, you work in the business for the week, and you pick it up again next Monday morning. I like that cadence personally. And just in general, there's always reasons to do it differently, but just kind of as a default proposal to someone, be like, well, how would we look at this weekly? Would that be useful? Another reason why I like weekly is you're dealing with the same number of days every week for the most part. You're dealing with Monday through Friday, 5 work days, and it's always apples to apples, as opposed to monthly where there's different number of working days in each month. February is the shortest. That always messes up your monthly reporting. And so you're not getting a true apples to apples comparison. You also run into things like at the end of the year in the US with Thanksgiving in November and Christmas and New Year's in December. You've got, it messes up those 2 months. So you kind of end up throwing out those 2 months a lot of times. Whereas if you're doing weekly, you still have good weeks in November and in December that you can look at. And then you're just throwing out weeks at that point. So that's my whole long spiel for why I like weekly. And so that's what we're going to do. We're going to look at these numbers and how they're doing by week rather than by month. All right. I think that's all I had in the way of introduction. So let's see here. What else did I have to show? All right. So before I pull up the Excel file, and you know what, let me just kind of whet your appetite for that. Let me show you what I've got to show you in Excel. So this is what we'll look at. Oh, I'm sorry, not that. This right here. So we'll look at building it like this. So you can see on the bottom, those are actually weeks, January 4th, 11th, 18th. You're just adding 7 to each day. So I think those are all Saturdays. Then on the top, it's telling us we're going to be showing the service level on the left axis. And you'll see that my sample data isn't the best yet, but I'm hoping to improve that by our next live broadcast. You can see everything is in the range of like 94 to 96%. So it's showing 94% on the very bottom on the left-hand side, but it never even gets up to 96%. And so I don't even know why it's bothering to draw those lines, but I'll try to get something that has a little more variation in service levels, like maybe something closer to 90% all the way up to closer to 100%. That just has to do with the sample data. And then the second thing, so up on the top versus inventory value, which is actually being shown on the right axis. So if you look on the right side going top to bottom, it starts at $100,000 on the top, goes down to $0 on the bottom. And then we're looking at it by week, which we already talked about on the bottom. And I'm only looking at 2025. So this would be January to July in 2025. So that's what we're going to pull up here in a little bit. But before we get to that, I want to take a little segue here to talk about what I've been working on for the past 12 months. I've been working with a company called Trailed, and Trailed is sponsoring this episode. So I'm going to put a little 5-minute timer on my watch here, and I'll just tell you what I've been up to lately at Trailed. Take a little break. So just a few weeks ago, I actually went up to Vancouver and met up with the team there. So my role has kind of evolved into mostly like a marketing role, doing stuff like this, where it's not your traditional marketing. I like to call it guerrilla marketing. It's more trying to do our best to serve the Acumatica community. We interface with multiple ERPs, but my focus is on the Acumatica space. And so serving the community with as useful as I can come up with stuff like this Excel file that we're going to go through, but then also taking a few minutes to let people know about Trailed, because I personally think it's a application that every single Acumatica customer could be or should be using. Because accounts payable is one of those areas where computers really have gotten to the point with AI and machine learning technology where it can do that job well and save you a lot of time. You're not going to be fighting the system. And so, so just letting people know about the Trailed product. And, my role mainly just about getting out there, traveling. I'll talk about that in a second. But serving the Acumatica community as best as I can, letting people know about Trailed. But it's also more than that. I'm spending probably good 15% of my time with the product team, talking to prospects, customers about specific needs, and really getting my pulse on how things are going in the real world. And so, it's more than just, hey, rah, your traditional marketing thing. Like I'm diving into the details just because that's the way I like to do it. And I really think that it's a good product. So that's not just on the technology side, but that's from the customers that I talk to. So anyways, met up with the team in Vancouver, and, maybe in my next 5-minute blurb on the next broadcast, I could tell you a little bit more about that. But I'll round out my remaining 2.5 minutes here with talking to you one big thing I'm working on over the next 12 months. So my goal is, well, first, let me tell you how I got there. So I went out to Lancaster, Pennsylvania. This is, I think, the largest Acumatica user group that meets on any type of regular cadence that's out there. Kind of interesting. It's in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, about an hour outside of Philadelphia. So I went out there earlier this year, and before I went out there, they asked if I could do something more than just a 30-minute or hour-long presentation. They asked if I could do something more like on the 3 to 4 hour workshop type of a way. And we decided, well, what should I build some content on? And we decided I could build something on Power BI, using Power BI in Acumatica. And so I did that, came up with something a few days before that, delivered it. I think it went really well. And so I then took that same Power BI content to Atlanta. So here's a picture of us in Atlanta. Refined a little further, took more feedback from there, but I thought it also went well there. And then recently, just a few weeks ago, I went out to Irvine in Southern California. And this was the first time we just kind of threw something together on our own, rented a room. It didn't piggyback off of an existing user group, sort of an experiment. And that also went really well. And so now I've delivered this 3 times, and I'm actually going to be going in September. This is the only one officially on the calendar so far, but I'll be going out to the New York City area. I was out there earlier this year, but just for more of a regular style user group. I'm going to go out there in September to do the Power BI workshop there. And so I've turned this into like an official little concert poster, and the idea is to book 20 cities, 20 tour dates over in the next year, and take this Power BI workshop to those different cities. And then the general agenda I use, as you can see, we've got 4 hours devoted to the workshop, 15 minutes just to get settled, and we launch into it, 15 minutes at the end to wrap up, and just half an hour in the middle for lunch. It's 5 hours total, but 4 hours of workshop content. So you're going to have 4 hours of solid workshop content with about 10 pages of class exercises. And you get your hands on Power BI. I think it's useful because, my time's up, because I think it's just like Trailed in that I think Power BI is something that every customer should at least take a look at and at least know that it exists, because in a lot of cases, it's a better way. And in many cases, it's the only way to do the kind of reporting that you're looking for. So anyways, that's what I'm working on for the next 12 months. I'd like to hit 20 cities. So if you are a customer and you've got the ability to host 15 to 20 people in a classroom style format with tables and a big screen up front and power for everyone's laptops, I'd love to take this to your city. You can check out the details at augforums.com, and it's right there on the homepage. All right, so that's what I'm up to. That's most of my time over the next 12 months with Trailed. It's just getting on the road, meeting people, and with just a little bit of talk over lunch. I just have a 15-minute PowerPoint presentation on Trailed. And then if anyone wants more details, you can book a 1-hour demo with our solutions team. All right, so then I'll round out my little Trailed break here with a 2.5-minute customer video, and then we'll come back and we'll pick up. Let me get it up on the screen. We'll pick up with opening the Excel file and look into building what you see on the screen here. So I'll be back in 2.5 minutes.
Protomet, we're always looking to innovate, even the boring sides of the business like finance. Before Trailed was very manual. We processed nearly 1,300 invoices per month, and that meant a lot of paperwork, printing out papers, marking up papers, tracking down those to approve the bills once they were entered in the system. Just a very slow, time-consuming process. I used to walk by the AP area and notice this stack of paper. In the stack of paper were multiple invoices not being paid for one reason or another. I had no visibility into those invoices, the amounts, or who they were to.
Before we implemented Trailed, it would take 9 to 10 hours a day to process the paperwork.
Matt Hensley, our director of finance, found the solution and said, hey, this is how I'm going to help scale our business without having to scale my team.
At the very first demo, I actually provided an invoice that I rubbed some dirt on and other things to check the OCR technology. It did work. Nodded to my accountant and said, hey, this software is for us. We've got to do this. It's a no-brainer. The implementation of Trailed was actually very easy. It started out with a form that we completed explaining our AP process. In the background, they configured the system and turned the system over to us. The software was so intuitive that I was able to go in and set up the scenarios and the workflows myself. I will say the customer success person was always there for us, although actually wasn't needed a lot because the software was so intuitive to install.
Trailed is auto learning, right? So it's already teaching itself a variety of PDFs. It's able to scan across them all and learn them all, whereas many of the others, you have to go through a teaching process. And so it puts the onus on us to do a lot of teaching. That's not necessary with Trailed.
Trailed saved us at least 60% processing time in AP, which means that we can process a lot more invoices now. Not only have we automated AP invoice processes, we actually have automated the matching of POs to invoices, which means that you can actually get them into Acumatica quicker. ROI was almost immediate. Makes my life easier because I have visibility into all the invoices that are in the system to be paid. And I can also challenge my AP personnel to work on things that are more meaningful to the company.
Since implementing Trailed, there's a lot less stress, thinking subconsciously all the time about the workload that you have facing you when you go in. That stress has been taken off, being able to do things much quicker and more efficiently. I have time to leave here at 4:30 on time and go play a round of golf. Wasn't able to do that before.
All right, we're back. So, ready to get into it. Let's, one last thing. If you are, I personally, again, think every Acumatica customer should at least take a look at Trailed. We were the only accounts payable automation solution in the final four for ISV Partner of the Year last year. And that's not just a popularity contest. That's off of actual sales that you've made. So people who saw the solution decided to buy it. That's how that, so you can see that. You just look at Acumatica ISV Partner of the Year, and you'll see we were the only AP automation solution in the final 4. And if you'd like to book a demo, which again, I think it's worth taking an hour to do that, trailedsoftware.com, and there's a big blue book a demo button up on the top there. All right, let's pull up our Excel file. So we are going to build this. And of course, I've actually already built it. So we'll back into this, and let me get my screen shared here. And let's do that. All right, so we should have an interactive thing here. Okay. So I like starting off in Excel because I think it's a good way to mock up what it is you're trying to do. Let me see if I can make this bigger. And a lot of why is it's just easier to generate sample data in Excel. So I'm going to geek out here on how I did that, just to an earlier point, to get this documented in a lazy way. Apologize. I wish I had time to write that nice comprehensive blog post with screenshots, but I'm just not going to have the time to do that. So at least we'll cover it in this video format. And this is the end result. So we've got, if I hover over, you can see on the left-hand side, it looks like 94% up to 95 something percent service level. I want to make this sample data better. Just haven't done that yet. But service level is, we can see on the right-hand side, it's the blue line. So if I hover over some of these, we can see, oh, I guess it doesn't show me the actual decimal. I wonder if we can fix that. You can see the decimals up here in that ugly thing. Let's see if we can fix that real quick. I don't remember how to do that in Excel. Oh, maybe I can do this at least to see. Ooh, like that. Still not showing the decimals. Can I do this? Hey, there we go. All right, at least you have an, I'm going to pull these off because it's too cluttered, but at least you can see here that this really is they are different numbers. It's not all 95%. It's 94.84, 95.01, et cetera, et cetera. Why the axes doesn't have 94 down here, I don't know. So definitely need some work there, but we do have at least different service levels that are being calculated. Oh, now I don't have an easy way to remove that. Just use undo. Okay, there we go. So that's the blue line. The orange line is the inventory value. So we're seeing that over time as well. So we can look, and this is on the bottom by week. So if we look like right here, we can see that for the week ending April 12th, we had an inventory value of $87,817. And if I hover over this point, for the same week ending April 12th, we have a service level of 95%. And again, I need to either put some decimals or get some more varied service levels. But we're able to see that and how they're doing. And so I really like this end product because obviously this is completely random sample data, which I'll show you in a little bit here. So this is not very realistic. We've got an inventory value that climbs way up to over whatever that is. What was this? $87,000. Then it drops all the way almost to zero. and we're maintaining a fairly consistent service level the whole time. So not really realistic, but at least you get the idea of how you're seeing both in the same place. And once this thing is built, when I show it at acuCONNECT in September, you'll be able to take this and plug it into your Acumatica data and see some actual real world data. I would love to see screenshots of that, by the way, if you wouldn't mind sharing. And then I also wanted to go a little further. I didn't just want to see it in total. I wanted to be able to slice by something. So I went with item class here. As we build this out in whatever tool we actually build it out in, we might want to do it by something else as well, but at least by item class. And I actually I use some products off of a website from an actual Acumatica customer, and I'll talk about that more in a little bit here. But if I filter on error tools, for example, watch what happens when I click. Both the blue line is going to change and the orange line is going to change. So let me click on error tools and give that a few seconds to filter. Boom. Both lines change. Then I go to hand tools and boom, hand tools change. So this is pretty cool that, and it's getting even faster once it kind of warms up. I'm able to look at it more than just in total, but even just getting it in total, if I clear that filter, that's also pretty amazing that we're seeing both of those metrics, service level and inventory value, all in one place. All right, so now how did I come up with this sample data? So let's take a look at that. So first thing I did is I spent way too much time. I spent a few hours doing this, but I played around with ChatGPT to take this. And I apologize, Neil, you might not be happy with me for doing this, but what I did is I went to the Wilmar website, which is here. So this is an actual Acumatica customer. Neil has been on this broadcast before, Neil Cantrell. And I went up to catalogs and I downloaded their master product catalog. So what did I do? Oh, I think I did it in a different browser. Give me a second. You have to allow cookies in your browser. There we go. So here's the catalog. You can see it's a 396 page catalog. And from a data standpoint, it's not super clean. And I'm sure that's intentional on Wilmar's side, because they don't want competitors just downloading their catalog. So you can see you've got like the name of the product up here. You've got the item number down here. And then for a lot of products like this one right here, the 6-inch random orbital buffer polisher, there's 2 items with different item numbers and different specs on those item numbers. So this is the data. Well, maybe not data. This is the information in a nice looking catalog form. And so I then downloaded the catalog. There was a way to do that, download button. So I got all 396 pages. And then I spent way too much time playing with ChatGPT to try to get it to extract the data. And it wasn't terrible. So I was able to get ChatGPT to extract, you can see item number and description from some stuff. So actually, let's double check this. Let's see this one. Let me pull up. I think I downloaded it already somewhere. Where did I put it? I think I remember where. I just need to pull it up. Oh, no, that's not it. There we go. I rename it. Okay, so here's my Wilmar product catalog. And if we take, still loading up. It's a big file. How big is it? It's It's a 622 megabyte file. It's a very large file. You can see it's starting to extract the text from it. But if we scroll down, we should see for this product W592, it's a 3/8 inch cordless drill. And there's the product number. And yes, it grabbed it correctly. So great job, ChatGPT, on that first one. And I haven't checked all of these, so hopefully it got these right. But then I get down here, the W9035. Let's find that one. Right here. And it did not pull up socket adapters. So I think what it pulled up instead is this over here. I told it to just look for the first thing above it that was in all capitals, and it found that instead. So I probably could have changed this to say, hey, if it's the same as the item number, go further up. But I decided to stop myself after a few hours. And so anyways, that one got wrong. But if I scroll down, you can see it did a decent job. Like for a lot of these, it got what looked like descriptions. And then most of the ones where it didn't, I think it's that same problem of, hey, if it was the same as the item number without the star, just go one more step up and you should find the item description, right? By looking for lines that are in all caps is how I was teaching it. And so I was actually pretty impressed, but I decided to stop myself. And then I went through and I put the item, I'm calling this item class. So I'm using Acumatica names here: inventory ID, description, item class. In reality, Wilmar's item classes are probably more complicated than this. They might go down to this sub level here where you have shop garage as a parent and then all these things underneath it. Then you got maintenance, all this stuff underneath it, specialty, all this stuff underneath it. But as far as the broad categories, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 down to air tools. And I put all the items in item categories. That I just did manually. I just scrolled through because you can see all the shop garage stuff is first. So I just scrolled through this way until I found the color change. There we go. Maintenance changes. So I just said, well, every item up until page 90. So I went and found the item that was on the bottom of this page and just copy and pasted shop garage all the way down. Then I did the same thing for maintenance and then the other 3 categories. So that wound up with those 5 categories here, and that translates over to the 5 categories here. Okay, so that's my sample data. You can see there's about a little over 2,000 parts. I also, if you were to try to do those 300 pages on your own, you'd find there are more products. I only grabbed the ones starting with M and W for some geeky ChatGPT reasons. I didn't want it to be too complicated. All right, so that was that. Then this next table is the customer, sample customers. I kept this one much simpler. So I did a customer ID A to Z. I put them in customer classes, retail to wholesale. And I was going to do names and salespeople, but eventually I realized that it wouldn't really be helpful because when we're charting service level and inventory value, I'm going to look at sales orders to get the service level data. So I do know customer for the order data. But when I'm looking at inventory value, all I know is the item. I don't know the customer. So I realized that wouldn't be useful. I was going to try to slice and dice by salesperson, for example, but I gave up on that. But at least I do have some customer data in there. I do think that one thing that I'd like to add, if I go back to the item, we have item class, but a lot of the ways that distribution companies do it is they just order their items for one vendor, at least one at a time. And there is a way to put a default vendor on an item in Acumatica. And I think that would be a good column to add in here. And then you'd be able to slice and dice not only by item class, but by vendor as well. But haven't done that yet. All right, next up is, what was this? Oh, a dates. So I had to do a dates table. And the reason is I want to look at this by week. So I'm not just looking at the days. I'm putting each date, and you can see I did a simple formula up here to calculate the week ending date. So I believe these are all Saturdays, but I'm putting each date into a week category. And then if I go to my next table, these are sales order lines. So I just came up with a random order number, and I made my data super simple. So every line is its own order number. So I just have one line orders in my sample data. I have a customer number, an item number, and a date lookup. So each one of these, you'd take 112 and you would go look it up in this date table. So the date of that order is June 5th. Same thing for the item and the customer. And then I can see quantity ordered and quantity shipped. Now this is where things started getting a little tricky, generating the sample data. I also, because I'm just generating it with an automated formulas, I generated 1 million rows. So a good substantial amount of sample data. You can see this Excel file is 130 megabytes, so pretty sizable Excel file there. Let's take a look at those. You can see these are just numbers. I'm not using Excel formulas. I first started to do it that way, but when you generate 1 million rows of Excel formulas, it takes a while to calculate. And the bigger reason why I don't like that is every time you like save the file or do anything that causes a recalculation, your numbers change. And I didn't want that. So instead I use Power Query to do it. So if we come into Power Query, we can see that I'm pulling in the items. This is just pulling the data that I created from that Wilmar product catalog with ChatGPT. Then I'm pulling in that real simple customer data. I'm pulling in the dates table. And then when we get to the sales order line, this is more complicated. So I'll just step through this. Let's see, we've got a list of random numbers. So really, this is my way of easily creating 1 million rows. Then next, we convert it to a table, which you can do. You just do this graphically. I think I did here, to table, hit that button. So that converts it to a table. Then I added an index. So this gives me my nice simple row number. I added an order number. So here I said, take the index value, start it at 5,000 and increment it by 23. Actually, it doesn't take the index value. I'm sorry. Just start at 5,000, increment it by 23. So this is just adding 23 to each order number. So we have some type of gap. So it looks somewhat realistic. Then I don't need that first column anymore. So I removed it. Then I add in a customer index. So there's 26 customers, and this is a way to randomly generate, randomly grab one of those 26 customers. Same thing with the items. There's 2019 items. Let me fact check that actually. Yep, there's 2020 rows, but the first row is a header, so there's 2019 items. So it's randomly picking one of those 2019 items. Then same thing with the date. There's 129 possible dates between January and July that are, I think I filtered out the weekends. So there's only actual dates. That way it wouldn't randomly pick weekend days. So it's randomly picking a date between January and July. And then I'm doing quantity ordered. So I'm randomly picking a quantity between 10 and 99. And that's generating all these random numbers here. I wound up doing a fulfilled logic. So I said generate a random number between 1 and 100. If it's more than 90, so about 10% of the time, I'm going to say that we were not able to fulfill the line. Otherwise, we were able to fulfill the line. And then on quantity shipped, let's see. Oh, at the moment, I'm only grabbing, I'm just saying if it's, am I missing something here? Oh, there we go. If it was fulfilled, then just say that I shipped the quantity that was ordered. If it was not fulfilled, so that 10% of the time, then I'm generating another random number and I'm taking a percentage of the quantity ordered and then rounding it down to a whole number. So this is the logic where I need to make this better because that's why my service levels are basically all around 95%. I want to make that more of like a 90 to 100%. So I need to tweak this formula, but that's what it's doing right now. And then we remove some columns, we reorder the columns, we type some of these, make these numbers, dates, etc. And that gets loaded into the sales order line table. Then the last table is my inventory values. So to do this, and this starts to get tricky in a real environment. And the reason is to know the balances by week. There are some Acumatica tables that store the inventory balances by financial period. But if I really want to know that by week, I'm going to have to calculate that myself. And that's actually a lot of data. That could be a challenge in your actual environment. But for my sample data, I did another 1,000,000 rows. You can see down here. And I just generated my own inventory transaction data. So if we come back in and take a look at that, this is basically, I think I'll wind up pulling this out of the INTran table in Acumatica. That's why I named it that. Right now, it's just Excel mockup. But I use the same technique. Generate 1,000,000 rows, convert it to a table, put an index column on it, get rid of that first column, add a random date, pick one of those random 129 dates, randomly pick a type. So pick a random number between 0 and 1. If it's more than 0.5, I'm going to call it an issue, otherwise a receipt. An issue will be a negative transaction. It's inventory going out. A receipt is a positive quantity coming in. Then I add, let's see, pick a random item. Pick a random quantity between 10 and 99. If it's a receipt, multiply it by a +1. Otherwise, multiply it by a -1 to make, you can see here, an issue winds up being negative. A receipt winds up being positive. And finally, change the types. So that's how I'm creating all this random data. And you can see it doesn't take too long. It's generating 1,000,000 rows here, 1,000,000 rows there. So 2,000,000 plus some items and dates and customers. If I click refresh on this, it's going to regenerate all that random data. Let's see what happens here. Let's see how long that takes. I think it's going to take less than like 15 seconds. We'll see. Calculating. There you go. So the advantage of doing it Power Query, one, it's faster. That 10 seconds or whatever that was, definitely faster than Excel formulas. But more importantly, once it refreshes, these numbers don't change on me. Unless I hit refresh again. And so if I go back to the charts here, actually that still looks the same. Uh-oh, what did I do wrong? Uh-oh, hold on. Let's see, let's make sure. That chart looks pretty similar to the one we had earlier. Let me pull that one back up. So there's the one we had earlier. There's the one we have now. That looks the same to me. So let's figure out what's going on. Let's see. see if the numbers actually change. So here we have first line is 23, then 98. Let's try to refresh again. See if that 23 and 98 change. Okay, so they did change. We now have 1521, a whole new set of random data, random items, random customers, and this table should have changed as well. All right, now it looks different. That looks different than that. Okay, not sure why it didn't work the first time. But you can see I'm using Power Query to generate random data. Looks like we've got a little more that are closer to 94% service level at this point. Okay, so that's the Power Query side of things. I also, actually one more thing to show. I like creating an empty table that I call measures. And then when I load this stuff, you do back on the Power Query side. Where's my... Here. So here's those Power Query connections, and I then did a load to only create connection, add this to the data model. So when you do that, that loads the data model, means the Power Pivot area, which you can see here. So it says manage data model, but then it says Power Pivot up here. So all those tables got loaded into Power Pivot. And then the key in here is to relate them together. So I related the sales order line to the items on that item index. I related it to customers on the customer index, to the dates on the ship date index, and then did the same thing with INTRAN. Synced it up on date, synced it up to the item, and I guess that's it. Yeah, because for INTRAN, there is no customer, so just two links there. And then I've got my separate measures table that stays disconnected from everything. All right, and then what you would do is you would create a pivot chart. I think I just did this one. Yeah, we're going to use the data model, which is that Power Pivot area. Add the chart, and you get something that looks like this. And once I'm going to show you where I drop the fields in a second, but you want to change the chart type because it defaults to a column, and I changed it to a line. That's how I wound up with this. And then it acts like a pivot table in that you can ignore that yellow thing. That doesn't, it's not a problem. This is like a pivot table in that you wind up putting something on the axes. This is like rows, this is like columns, and then you have values here. So I just dragged week ending from the dates table, dragged week ending down here. This happens automatically. And then I added service level and inventory value to the values area. You can see if I uncheck that, that orange bar goes away. If I recheck it, ooh, what happened? Oh, I messed up the axis. Okay, let me get it back there. I'll show you what happened there in a sec. So actually, you know what? Yeah, let's do it this way. If I take it off, put it back on, you can see this is part of the challenge in that it's showing service levels, which are these tiny decimal numbers. and then showing us inventory values, which are huge numbers. And so how do you reconcile the two? Well, you have to go in to somewhere here. Where did I do that? I'm glad this came up because I would not have remembered to cover this. We need to turn on a secondary axis. And there's a way to do that somewhere. Let me just Google that. Okay. So it actually was not a line chart. I lied earlier. It was a combo chart. And you can see it shows the two things here. Let's do a line for this. And we want the inventory value on a secondary axis. So if we hit OK, that gives us one axis for service level and a second axis for inventory value. Now, I just noticed my sample data here is worse than the previous sample data because most of my inventory values are negative. So I've got some work there to not allow that to go negative somehow. You know what, let's refresh that again, see if we get better random data. I probably just need to adjust it to say maybe do more receipts than issues. Actually, I have an idea on how to do that. I'm going to do that once it finishes refreshing here. And we're almost done, by the way. I just want to cover how these calculations are getting made. But before we do that, I want to get a little bit better random data. All right, so this one, I'm doing a little better, but I still wind up with some negatives. Let's see if we can fudge that a little bit. Actually, in the first example, the first screenshot I had, you'll notice right here, we almost get to zero, but we never actually get to zero in total. However, if even for that data, if we were to filter on this item class, some of the item classes did have negative inventory balances. So not realistic sample data. Let's see if we can make it a little better. So how we just do this, we add the type. Instead of saying if it's more than half the time, make it an issue. Let's say if it's less than 0.2. So that means 20% of the time it'll be an issue, 80% of the time it'll be a receipt. That should create more positive balances in theory. Let's see if that works. Whoa. Well, we definitely have positive numbers. Wow, I was not expecting such a straight line. Let's try refreshing it one more time. I was hoping to have something that went up and down a little bit more. So I might have to tweak this for the next live broadcast. Let's just try one more refresh and see what happens. You see that generating good sample data is not easy. It's kind of like writing fiction for novels. It's harder to do that than it is to simply report on actual people's lives. Reality is always way more interesting than fiction. And I think same with sample data here. If I had an actual acumatic environment that I'd be allowed to use their data for, I would. I stole Wilmar's products, but obviously I'm not using their data. So, yeah, not sure what's going on there, but we'll just stop that for now, and I'll play with that more offline. Let's at least see if we get some variation by item class. Not a whole lot. Okay, I'm going to tweak that more. So I do want to point out, this is pretty fast. I mean, we're dealing with 2 million rows of data. If you were to run a report in Acumatica across 2 million rows of data, that thing would take forever. It might even time out. And then if you wanted to change your mind and say, well, only run it for air tools or hand tools, it'd take forever again. But look how fast this is happening. So that's because I'm using the Power BI functionality in Excel, combining Power Query, Power Pivot. They now call that Power BI. But that data model / Power Pivot model just works really well in terms of speed and handling large volumes of data. But the other thing it does really well is it handles calculations really well. So let's look at service level first. If I edit this service level calculation, this one's pretty simple. I'm doing basically the same math that I did in Excel at the very beginning when I was demonstrating service level. See if I can make this bigger. Hopefully that's readable. So this is just totaling up the quantity shipped divided by the quantity ordered. So rather than just counting the lines, that first service level example that ChatGPT gave me, I'm actually doing it by quantities. So lines with more quantities essentially get weighted more. I like that calculation better. So that's service level. Inventory value, though, is a little more complicated because inventory value needs to be a running total. It can't just be, you can't just say sum up the inventory transactions. If you do that, you're only going to get what happened that week. And you're going to see that inventory went up that week or went down that week, but you're not getting the total balance. So this is my calculation. It looks a little crazier than it really is. First, I'm just detecting, well, what week am I at? That's what this does. Then I'm going to go get, using all selected, it's going to get everything out of the inventory transaction table, but it's going to filter it to only be dates that are less than or equal to the current date. And that's how we get the running total. It's not just what's happening for this week, but it's everything on or before this week. And then I total up the quantities and return the result. So that's the calculation there. So that's what gives me the running total. And that's basically it. So this is my Excel mockup. Now, in part 2 of this live broadcast, whenever I get to that, sometime between now and September, I do want to take a look at how we'll choose which tool to use. And I want to start by looking at the Acumatica reporting tools like Acumatica dashboards, generic inquiries, Acumatica pivot tables, and report designer. So I want to look through that in the next broadcast and select a tool. I'm pretty sure I'm going to wind up going with Power BI on this, but I do want to spend some time looking at why we would go to Power BI rather than just do it blindly. And so that'll probably be a part 2 broadcast. And then part 3 will probably be actually building something out in that tool that's connected to Acumatica data. And so you'd be able to take whatever the finished product is, in theory, assuming I get there, you'd be able to take that finished product and plug it into your own Acumatica environment. So you'd be able to get this service level and inventory value on your own Acumatica data. All right, well, I think that's it for today. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.